All right, get ready to dive into the world of survival games. We're taking a deep dive into the biggest upcoming releases for 2024, and let me tell you, next year is going to be huge for fans of the genre. Just from the looks of this video, it seems like open world is the name of the game these days, huh?
Yeah, it really does seem like that's what everyone's going for.
Which makes sense, right? I mean, open world environments kind of go hand in hand with that sense of freedom and exploration that survival games are all about.
It's not just about surviving, it's about really making that world your own, even if it is trying to kill you at every turn.
Speaking of unforgiving, let's talk about Once Human. This one's already got everyone buzzing. They're calling it The Real Day Before, which, after that whole fiasco, is saying something.
Oh, totally. Remember all that hype around the day before, all those promises, those amazing trailers, and then PFFT.
Yeah, it was like the gaming equivalent of a disappearing act.
Right. But Once Human seems to be ticking all the boxes that the day before missed. We're talking about a massive world, creepy monsters, and a huge focus on base building, which is something the day before barely touched on. And did you see those graphics? Next gen all the way.
And don't forget the PvP. It's not just about surviving the elements and creatures, it's about surviving other players too. Raids, factions, all that good stuff.
Definitely adds a whole other level of intensity, that's for sure.
Okay, next up we've got a game that takes a classic, zombies, and gives it a bit of a twist. I'm talking about Blight. Survival, set in a medieval world ravaged by, you guessed it, a plague. I gotta say, the idea of fighting off hordes of the undead with swords and shields, it's pretty refreshing.
Right, we've seen the whole modern-day zombie apocalypse 1,000 times, so this historical setting, I'm into it.
And it sounds like they're really leaning into the realism of it all, too. The environments, the combat.
And the atmosphere.
Yeah.
The video mentioned they're going for a really dark, cinematic feel, kind of like a Plague Tale in that sense, which honestly is a great comparison.
Yeah, that definitely caught my attention. A Plague Tale. Nailed the whole grim medieval vibe.
Exactly, and imagine that, but with zombies thrown into the mix. It's like you're already dealing with the Black Death, and then, boom, undead hordes.
Talk about a recipe for a terrifying gaming experience. And speaking of terrifying, let's move on to The Lost Wild, which is basically every dinosaur enthusiast's dream come true.
A realistic Jurassic Park experience. Where do I sign up? But seriously, what makes this one stand out is that it's not just another dinosaur action game. It's about survival, plain and simple.
Right, you've got your Arks and your Isles, which are great games, don't get me wrong. But this is different. The Lost Wild wants you to feel like you're really stranded on an island, overrun with dinosaurs that act like, well, actual dinosaurs.
And that's where the whole first-person perspective really comes into play. Imagine being eye level with a T-Rex, feeling that sense of awe and terror. It's not about mowing them down with guns blazing, it's about using your wits and whatever you can scavenge to survive.
And did you see the way they've rendered those dinosaurs? Absolutely stunning.
Unreal Engine 5 is a game changer.
All right, let's jump from prehistoric threats to futuristic ones. Because we can't talk about 2024 without mentioning Terminator, Survival. I'm still geeking out that we're finally getting a Terminator game that actually looks worthy of the franchise.
It's about time, right? They've tried before, but nothing's really captured the feel of those first two movies.
From what we've seen, this one's set years after Judgment Day, and you experience it all through a first-person perspective. Think Days Gone, but with Terminators.
Perfect comparison. And the video mentioned different factions vying for control, so there's a whole strategic layer there. You have to choose your allies carefully, scavenge for resources, and, oh yeah, try not to get turned into scrap metal.
Speaking of which, did you catch the part about the T-800 that hunts you throughout the game?
Yeah. Now that's just straight up nightmare fuel. Imagine trying to survive in that wasteland with a relentless killing machine on your tail.
Talk about a constant state of paranoia.
It adds a whole new meaning to survival of the fittest.
So wait, does that mean we've got to worry about more than just Terminators in this game? Like, what about those classic Terminator fears? Is a rogue stapler going to try and take over the world?
Now that would be a unique gameplay element. Not sure about sentient office supplies, but they have mentioned a pretty in-depth crafting and resource management system. Like, you'll be scavenging for parts, fixing up weapons, even hacking into Skynet systems.
Talk about high-stakes crafting. Okay, enough about the future for now, though. Let's jump to a game we can actually play right now.
Enshrouded really stood out to me, I gotta say. It just feels different, you know? Like a breath of fresh air compared to some of the other grim settings we've talked about.
Yeah, it's definitely a departure from the usual doom and gloom. Enshrouded has got this bright, colorful world that kind of reminds me of Dragon's Dogma. but with its own thing going on, of course. It's out already on a bunch of platforms, too. And people are loving it. Critics, players, everyone. And it supports up to 16 players in co-op. I can only imagine the craziness of trying to organize that many people for a raid.
Oh, the potential for chaos is through the roof.
That's what I love about these games, you know? You never know what's going to happen when you throw a bunch of players together in a world like that. Speaking of unpredictable, let's talk about Light No Fire. You know, the one that got that surprise reveal at the Game Awards. The fact that it's being made by the No Man's Sky folks has me seriously intrigued.
Yeah, that definitely turns some heads. Hello Games, they're known for thinking outside the box.
Right. And visually, it looks like it shares some similarities with Valheim. You know, like kind of fantasy Viking vibe.
Totally got a Valheim vibe from the trailer, especially with the emphasis on building and stuff.
And knowing Hello Games, they'll probably take it to a whole other level. I mean, just look at what they did with the base building in No Man's Sky.
Exactly. So who knows what they'll come up with for Light No Fire. Okay, but we've got to talk about Stalker 2, Heart of Chernobyl. This game has been a long time coming, and honestly, it's incredible that it's even releasing.
It really is. Given everything that's happened,
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to even talk about the game without thinking about, you know, what the developers have been going through.
You're telling me the fact that they've kept working on this game in the middle of a war? It's just wow.
Yeah, it's incredibly inspiring.
For those who don't know Stalker 2, it takes place in the Chernobyl exclusion zone.
Right, so you're not just battling, mutated creatures and radiation. You're also uncovering these mysteries, dealing with the fallout of this disaster, both literally and figuratively.
And your choices actually matter. Like, they have real consequences in the game world, which is something the Stalker games have always been known for.
It's that whole player agency thing, right? Your decisions shape the story. And with Unreal Engine 5.2, they're really pushing the boundaries of what you can do. It looks incredible.
Seriously impressive stuff.
You know, it's amazing to see how far survival games have come. We've gone from just the basics, food, water, shelter, to these incredibly complex experiences.
I know, right? They're like interactive stories now with these rich worlds and characters, and they really make you think.
And they're not afraid to explore some pretty heavy themes. Like Stalker 2 definitely seems like it's going to deal with some dark stuff.
Yeah, loss, sacrifice, the whole deal. But that's what makes it interesting, right? It's not shying away from the reality of what survival would be like in that kind of situation.
And that's what makes these games so compelling. It's that struggle against the odds. It's not just about staying alive, is it? It's about, like, mental toughness, adapting, that instinct we have to overcome challenges.
Absolutely. I think these games really tap into something fundamentally human. You know, we all face obstacles in life, right? Whether it's work, relationships, whatever. And in a way, these games, they let us test ourselves, push our limits, but in a safe space.
It's like a virtual training ground for resilience. And you know what's really cool? It's amazing to see how much the survival genre has evolved. We've gone from just the basic needs, food, water, shelter, to these really complex stories, these immersive worlds.
I know, right? It's not just about surviving anymore. It's about the why, the how, the who you become along the way.
Yeah. And Stalker 2, I mean, that seems like a perfect example. It's not shying away from those tough questions, those big themes of loss and sacrifice.
It's pretty impressive when you think about it. They're dealing with some really heavy stuff, but it doesn't feel out of place. It still feels like, you know, a Stalker game.
Exactly. So for anyone listening who might be new to survival games, or maybe you've tried some and bounced off, I really think 2024 is going to be a great year to dive back in.
Definitely. Don't be afraid to try something new. You might just find your next favorite game. After all, there's a whole world of survival out there just waiting to be explored.
And on that note of exploration, I think we'll wrap up this deep dive. Until next time, everyone, happy surviving.